You wake up, it's summer. But the morning feels strangely cold. You step outside and look up. Something is wrong with the sun. It's still there. You can still see its shape, hanging pale behind a strange haze, like someone has draped a curtain across the sky. Its light reaches you. Its warmth doesn't. There's no explanation on a screen because there are no screens. No forecast. No satellite image. No one to tell you what this is, or when it will end. All you know is this. It is the year 536, and the sun that has never once failed you is failing you now. You don't know it yet, but this is only the first thing that's going to go wrong. Because what begins above your head will eventually reach your fields, your food, your home, and finally, the people around you. Most people in 536 have no electricity, no supermarkets, no trucks carrying food across continents. For millions, survival depends on something incredibly simple: the next harvest. If the weather cooperates, your family eats. If it doesn't, there is no emergency shipment coming. And in 536, the weather stopped cooperating. The Byzantine historian Procopius left one of the only surviving descriptions from the time. He wrote that the sun gave its light without brightness, almost like the moon. He claimed it stayed that way for an entire year. These people didn't know about particles in the upper atmosphere. The sun had been one of the few constants of human existence, and suddenly, it looked like something else entirely. Modern research using evidence preserved in tree rings has revealed just how unusual this period was. Temperatures across parts of the northern hemisphere dropped sharply. The years around 536 became the beginning of one of the coldest periods of the last 2,000 years. Cold summers aren't just uncomfortable. For an agricultural society, they're catastrophic. And once the harvest disappears, the clock starts ticking, because your food supply has to survive until the next one. Far away in China, historical records describe summer frost, even snow, in some regions. It's supposed to be summer. The crops should be growing. Instead, frost covers the ground, and there is nothing anyone can do about it. No one knows if next year will be better. No one even knows what caused this year to go wrong. But we do. Not from anything written down, from something colder and far more permanent. Deep inside glaciers, snow falls year after year, compressing into ice, sealing tiny chemical traces of the atmosphere inside it like a fossil record of the sky itself. The ice remembers. And when scientists examined ice dating to the 6th century, they found the signature of a massive volcanic eruption. When sulfur-rich gases reach the stratosphere, they form tiny particles that reflect sunlight back into space before it ever reaches the ground. The eruption doesn't need to bury the world in ash, it only needs to get between you and the sun. And suddenly, the strange descriptions from 536 stop sounding like folklore. The weak light, the haze, the cooling, the failed harvests. To the people watching the sky, it may have looked like the sun itself was dying. In reality, the atmosphere had become a veil. But one question remained. Where was the volcano? Evidence points toward a massive eruption in the northern hemisphere, possibly Iceland, though the exact source and sequence is still an active area of research. But wherever it happened, its effects didn't stay local. A volcano can erupt on the other side of the planet and still change the weather above your home without you ever knowing why. That's what made this so frightening. Millions of people were suffering from something they couldn't see, couldn't understand, and couldn't outrun. And the world was about to find out it wasn't over. Around 540, another enormous eruption occurred. Another layer of volcanic material entered the atmosphere. Another blow to a climate that hadn't recovered from the first one. This was no longer one bad harvest. Repeated shortages don't just hurt, they compound. If one harvest fails, you eat your reserves. If the next one fails too, those reserves are already gone. Your family has one sack of grain left. Part of it is food. The rest has to be planted next spring. Eat all of it, and you might survive this winter. But when spring comes, you have nothing to plant. Save it. And someone in your family may not survive long enough to see spring. Communities get more desperate. Disease gets harder to survive. Every disaster makes the next one worse, and the people living through it still had no idea what was coming next. Because in 541, reports of a terrifying disease began emerging out of Egypt. It spread fast through the Byzantine world. By 542, it reached Constantinople, one of the largest, wealthiest cities on Earth, the capital of Emperor Justinian's empire. At first, someone on your street gets sick, then another, then another. Soon the dead are accumulating faster than they can be buried. Normal life begins to break down, and nobody knows what is carrying the disease from one person to the next. This was the beginning of what we now call the Plague of Justinian. The disease is linked to Yersinia pestis, the same bacterium behind later outbreaks of plague. And in a crowded 6th century city, there was almost nothing anyone could do to stop it. Procopius described death on a scale that overwhelmed daily life in Constantinople. Fear spread faster than the disease itself. Historians still debate the exact death toll, and ancient writers were prone to giving enormous dramatic figures. But there's little doubt this became another major crisis layered on top of years of climate disaster. And that's what makes this period so remarkable. It wasn't one catastrophe. It was the sequence. The sky changed. Temperatures fell. Harvests failed. Another eruption struck. Then, plague arrived. A child born just before 536 would grow up watching the adults around them stare nervously at a sun that no longer looked right. Then, food gets harder to find. The winters stretch longer than they should. The summers never quite warm up. After a few years, it might finally seem like the worst is behind them. Then, people start getting sick. There is no concept of volcanic aerosols, no germ theory, no modern medicine to reach for. From their perspective, it wouldn't look like bad luck. It would look like the world coming apart. To people living in the 6th century, a darkened sun could mean more than bad weather. It could look like a warning, maybe even the end of the world. For most of history, we didn't know any of this either. A dim sun, cold weather, failed crops, disease, sat disconnected for centuries. Then science started connecting them. Tree rings showed the cooling. Ice cores held the volcanic material. Historical records described exactly what people had lived through. Different pieces, same puzzle. And the picture it revealed is unsettling. Human civilization is far more dependent on the stability of nature than we like to admit. Calling 536 the single worst year in human history comes with a warning label. There's no scientific measurement for the worst year ever, and history has no shortage of horrific competitors. The experience of 536 wasn't even identical everywhere. But that's not really what makes this year worth telling. What makes it extraordinary is how suddenly the ordinary rules of life seem to break. One year, the sun rises and warms the land exactly like it always has. Then something explodes, somewhere on Earth, and nobody sees it happen. Nobody living through the beginning could have understood the chain of events they'd just stepped into. They didn't know a volcano had changed their climate. They didn't know another eruption was coming. They didn't know disease would soon tear through some of the greatest cities on Earth. They only knew that the sun had grown dim. The summers had turned cold. The harvests were failing. And somehow, things kept getting worse. They couldn't know what caused it. They couldn't know when it would end. They were simply unlucky enough to be alive in 536.